a very humble person, Charlie.
I repeat what smarter people say. That's my entire job description.
That is all I do too. I'm just a humble podcaster and an asker of dumb questions, just like you for the most part. This is what we do. Uh, but welcome back everybody to the Bitcoin Weekly Kickback. It's Labor Day, so it's a holiday. So we're getting paid double time today. You know, double of nothing is still freaking nothing.
We only
So
got to split the
thanks for
money.
coming.
We only got to split the money 3 ways instead of 4 this time.
Yes, yes,
Good luck for them.
exactly, 100%. But we're just talking as we do, and I have notes, things to talk about, lots of stuff around proof of work today, mining. We're bringing back fractal again because it's so interesting. But you guys are talking about something that involves a rodent, something called the rat, and I don't. What in the world is this?
Charlie,
Donny,
how do you
what's
say the rat? How do you say it from the outside perspective? Because I can't say it shortly. I don't think.
Me?
Yeah.
Back before reinscription was really a thing, and before there was anybody doing this, Donny had this idea that I've got a rat inscription that I'm going to send to people and kind of handhold them, and they can inscribe rat-related things onto this inscription, and it's become kind of a who's who of ordinals and this
Like a
great
yearbook.
living community project of the most reinscribed asset, I think, right?
I think it is, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. And I'll go back to like what the rat is in a sec. But when you make a parent-child collection, and you go to the parent on ordinals.com, and let's say there are 200 children or something like that, it breaks it up into 2 pages. There's only 100 per page. Nobody's ever reinscribed more than 100 things. So now that there are 101 on it, it didn't go to a second page. There's no pagination or page separation of reinscriptions because it's never like been an issue to do that. So if we have 1,000 inscriptions at the end of this year on the rat, it's going to be one long tail of rats that doesn't get paged off, which is funny. We just didn't know that was going to happen. And over the course of doing this, we've exposed a lot of like weaknesses in marketplaces and wallets indexing and displaying one stat or one UTXO that has a ton of inscriptions backed into it. So we just like we're kind of breaking stuff along the way because it was early and nobody was really using reinscription for anything. And still it's kind of not, except for clerical items, I guess, unlike ords are. Most things are reinscribed, and some of the gamified things like Game of Blocks used reinscription in order to indicate gameplay. But what the rat was about, I was on a space one day. I bonked my head like 20 years ago, and I can't form memories. So I was like, what happens if I try to draw something from memory? Like, what does it look like? I was like, what if I draw myself as a rat? What does it come out looking like? It turns out it comes out looking like a no rat in every rat. There's no characteristics really at all, except that it's like a line drawn rat. So it doesn't really look like any specific rat. And then I thought to myself, well, I wonder what other people think of when they think of rat. Like what pops into their heads, because they can't separate their experience in the past from their current experience now, where I can't bring my experience in the past into my current experience. So what would the difference be in what they see versus what I see? And a fun way to explore what reinscription can do, other than building like data trees or something like that, is to pass it around and let people scribble on it. So we did that for a while. It got stuck in a bunch of wallets, and a year later, it's now in Sanjay's wallet, and he does all the reinscribing of people's submissions. But we're still just sort of like manually taking submissions of what people think of when they think of rats, and really not saying no to anyone, because that's not the point of Bitcoin or expression or art or whatever. There's one of the most recent ones is just 2 naked feet holding a rat in between them. And it's like, I don't see the value in that, but I don't have to. That's not the point. The point is that someone else saw that, right? But now it has 101 inscriptions on it, which I think is as far as I've seen, most inscribed that.
And it just
Most
got RAF, the ord client and GitHub maintainer interested in it, which
Really
is
exciting.
I would say the first big I don't know, you're a celebrity, Donny, but like, you know, A tier like celebrity, I think.
If there are only 2 A-tier people, being Raph and Casey, this is the first one. Or if it's like you, Raph, Casey, and Aaron or something, it's the first of that group. But honestly, like the first 8 people to inscribe on it were Sanj, Lifo, Chip, who else? I don't know, whatever. There's like 10 devs were the first people. You know, Zero was on there too.
It's become such a cool community project. And I remember like little week-long events where it got stuck in someone's wallet or something, and then
Months.
yeah, so it was just something
Months
come in,
sometimes.
manually split a UTXO, send that out. It was it's been this great story, and it's taken on a life of its own, and I just love that you started it. So it keeps
Thanks.
living on.
Dude,
Yeah,
that's
it keeps
freaking.
happening.
That is so dope. And just for people, because like I had to think about like recursion and like reinscriptions. Reinscriptions are like it's like a stacking of the paper, right? Like the top is the top one always the one that gets presented. So the most recent reinscription, or is it
First one.
a choice?
The first one is always the one that gets displayed because
So the original is the
depends
one
on
that
the
always
Explorer, but
shows,
yeah.
and then you have to
Yeah.
click on the Explorer page. You can page down and see. Okay.
They're
That's really
listed on
cool.
ord.io, but they're displayed in full on ordinals.com. So you can
Yeah.
click individually on the inscriptions that are reinscriptions on ord.io, but only the first
Mm.
one shows. And on ordinals.com, all of them show in chronological order from first to last.
Got it. That's cool. Yeah, and I like the I remember seeing someone was doing this thing called like the Conjuring or something. It's like a very ominous name, but it was about you had to like I don't think it was in Bitcoin. It was in ETH, but it was like you had to send this asset like 1,000 times for the Conjuring to happen, and then once it gets stuck, it just like the viral loop dies. But there's something about this for like a social loop that it's like you pass it around and it has provenance, and once it hits a certain threshold, like everybody wins. Everyone gets their drop or whatever it is. That it's a pretty cool mechanism that no one really uses, and you were just doing
Yes.
it because of freaking curiosity.
It's fun. Yeah, and there's a collection of 70 pieces, the 69 others than the rat that I've been giving out to friends that I think are cool or I like a lot. And some of them I kept around and I reinscribed something else on them. And others I sent to artists, like the first 7 I think it distributed. I gave them to people and made them, and it was people from other chains for the most part, made them reinscribe a piece of their own on this thing in order to get it from. So like it started out, I think I auctioned the first 3 and gave 90% of the money to the Open Ordinals Institute. There were a lot of things that ended up being cool about this, but didn't catch, like there wasn't enough activity where people thought they could make money off of it. So it sort of fizzled out, but it did what it was supposed to do at the time. There's still room. Still messing around with it.
That's I freaking sick. You're a kicker brain, Donny. Cool. Let's okay, let's jump into some that's a banger opener for sure. I like this. But let's talk about some proof of work stuff. Fractal continues to be a hot topic. There's a bunch of topics we could touch on, but I want to start with, and it happened in the last episode of like proof of work seems like a bad idea for me, anyways. A bad idea for other chains because of how competitive it is to the L1. It's hard to compete with Bitcoin. So there's this like lingering question of does proof of work for new chains, or is it kind of doomed to fail or be centralized, or all these kind of open questions. And Charlie, you said something on the pod last time of like I think all miners should be selling their Bitcoin, which kind of becomes like it's a pretty good token reveal mechanism because you're always bringing it back into the market. So maybe it does work, but I'm just curious, like first broadly before we jump into fractal stuff, like how do we think about proof of work working when it's so telegraphed and you know people are going to try and front run it?
I feel that so much of how we got to where we are in Bitcoin's existing proof of work model is very path dependent. I will actually wax a little Bitcoin maxi here and adopt some of the language that I think many Bitcoin maxis use to talk about Bitcoin's genesis, in that it is kind of this like inception moment, which is irreplicable. Never say never, but like it is we had a very unique first 10 to 15 years of Bitcoin where it kind of relied upon it not being understood as this valuable asset by many people. And because of that, it allowed the proof of work like component of it to develop and build into this multi-billion-dollar revenue business as it is. And it's I don't think I see that being replicatable. We'll see. If you want to look back at other cryptocurrencies which have tried to do this, they usually falter in a couple ways. One, which is that they can't bootstrap from zero, from the hobbyist to enthusiast to part-time hobbyist, enthusiast, professional to highly industrialized. You just cannot recreate that path dependency and adoption path of a network anymore. And that's almost a prerequisite for these networks to be bootstrapped. So then the other one is, because of that, anything that is proof of work is going to bend towards specified business models, specifically the Bitmains of the world who produce the actual computers which do this. And that has led to a number of different cryptocurrencies which are proof of work, which appear to be fair, but are actually more kind of propelled by the picks and shovels sellers of those businesses, which I don't think is bad. I just think we should be very aware that there is a long graveyard of things that led up to various proof of work cryptocurrencies before we got to Caspa, which is the hot proof of work cryptocurrency right now, heralded as the second coming of Bitcoin, and yet I don't see how it is any different than the graveyard of other cryptocurrencies like it before. So proof of work is very special. It's very unique. It's the best kind of consensus mechanism I think that we have. But yeah, I think it's just a very good bet to be very skeptical about new proof of work networks, just at a long-term adoption to bootstrapping to proliferation phase. So that's my long answer about that question.
Donny,
Also, sorry, Caspa people. Like, so if you're watching this and I'm shitting on Caspa, I'm sorry, but like, this is the reality, guys. Like, this is not a cryptocurrency you own in 5 years. This is just the reality of it.
maybe I'm in a bubble because I don't even know of Caspa, so now I got to go Google so I'm not behind the eight ball and whatever the heck that is.
Best
But
luck. It's like the narrative. It's the ETH Classic or the whatever. The Monero people are also kind of on this train, but I like Monero, so.
yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts or if you have any questions, Donny, because you're kind of newer here. So like,
It seems to me that a big part of the charm of Bitcoin was that it started at CPU and moved to GPU, and then like to solve problems moved to ASIC, and then ASIC sort of brought on commercial. ASIC and price action brought on commercial and kicked out people, which is going to parlay nicely into a next section that we're going to do, I think, on home mining. The path that to Bitcoin's success was very specifically because of every single thing about it, I think, like from my reading of it. Sort of decide to fire something else up and try to emulate that kind of is like, it's like photocopying a photocopy, or eventually down the line you just kind of you're emulating something that's sort of like unemulatable in a way. And I don't see the difference or the benefit rather in proof of work consensus for things like Fractal or anything at the moment that's starting out and has the maybe MO that newer chains are going for, because they have a team, they have a company, they have a pre-mine. They're like, nothing about them is like Bitcoin, except for in one case, the scripting language. So like, it's like a shadow of a shadow. It's like, look, Dad, I'm going to mow the lawn with you. It's like you're pushing the lawnmower that's got like the bubbles is coming out of it next to your dad, but you're not really mowing the lawn, you know? That's what it feels like to me. I don't know. And I'm not trying to like speak ill of any of this stuff because it's well beyond my technical knowledge to actually poke holes in it. But from like a theoretical perspective, it just feels like it's missing a lot of the initial points and maybe even the end goal that Bitcoin has or had.
Yeah, I think if you consider that the best blockchains are going to be the most emergent over the course of their lifetime. So blockchains which are which are concepted and launched in this like capital intensive, infrastructure intensive way, I'm not saying they don't work. It's just I'm very skeptical that they're going to be these open networks just by the nature of how they launch. And so I actually am quite fond of ETH, crucify me, because it has been fairly organic, as much as Max like to criticize its genesis. Like it's had a pretty interesting like path dependent adoption to where it is. I just don't think you can replicate Bitcoin. So trying to brand something as an improved Bitcoin, I'm like, yeah, there might be better ways of like producing blocks. I don't think you can get there for the time being, maybe ever. It's kind of like there are better protocols we could have built the internet on, better than TCP/IP. But the reason that is one of the protocols which backends the entire communications layer that is the internet is because of like its openness and its simplicity and just the way it happened to be there at that time in the building and adoption of the internet and why it remains the standard today. So yeah, that's kind of my
There's something
view
to
on
be said for like the 15 years of proof of work history that Bitcoin has already. Like trying to start something now, you're always going to be 15 years behind that level of like having to unravel something, right?
or you
No,
just
is
can't
that
replicate it because like, imagine you could tell investors that they can go back to 2010 and they can mine Bitcoin. You're going to have $100 billion worth more stuff mining Bitcoin, and you just cannot recreate that. Um, the other component is actually, as I mentioned, ETH. There is a bit of like a uh, kind of like a come to Jesus moment on ETH right now with proof of stake and the merge. There's a lot of disillusionment, which weirdly enough almost arrives at this view that I see some of the foremost tip of the spear ETH researchers saying maybe proof of work actually is the best way to produce blocks. Proof of stake produces blocks largely deterministically. Proof of work is a probabilistic block production technique. Proof of stake is a permissioned network technically at a fundamental level. In practice, it's not that way. Whereas proof of work is an open way of acquiring tokens. These are very core differences in first principles, places that these networks start from.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it, which is like if you can front run, if you know that Bitcoin's going to be big in 2010, you can do. Hold on, can you hear me? Okay, I sound
you're
weird in
good?
my
Yeah, we got
headphones.
you. We're good.
Okay, I'm tripping. I'm having some weird echo. Anyways,
Read to me.
so you can if you can front run it because those first few years are so important when it comes to like supply coming on there. If you can just go super hard the first 4 years and then turn everything off, like you can have a ton of the supply and control the market. So that you see this with token launches too, which is like when everyone tries to be early, money comes in, token goes crazy, maybe it gets traction, probably not, and then it slowly dies out, and then like it hits a cliff and it just like drops off. And it seems like proof of work chains that try and mimic that, and they're kind of like telegraphed and known. They do the same thing. You just have a bunch of more friction on the front end to buy machines and do this stuff, but it ends up in the same destination. Um, yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, I keep harping on this idea of path dependency of adoption and emergent adoption of these decentralized networks as something you just cannot. You would have to roll back the clock in time to go back and launch a different, better Bitcoin. It's almost impossible. So, never say impossible, but I just think for the foreseeable future, it is Bitcoin is the proof of work network. And I mentioned this, like I say that I think the merge for ETH was largely driven by a recognizance of this reality that this is a winner take most or all regime when it comes to proof of work. And I think that was actually smart for ETH to do, although it's resulted in what is currently kind of a disillusioned developer landscape.
Mm. Um, one more quick question on this, and this is for you, Charlie, because you mentioned there's a graveyard of proof of work chains trying to bootstrap, etc. And
Yeah.
like I've heard of this in the narrative of like merge mine chains, like Namecoin or whatever, that like they try and work. You look at the data, merge mining becomes very centralized very quickly. If just like two pools merge mine, they have like all of the hash rate, if you will. And so these things kind of have a hard it's hard to get decentralization, and then it's hard to get users to have enough fees to make it worthwhile. So like I don't know the context of this. Like what's the brief history, just like this 90-second history of like proof of work graveyard and like why is bootstrapping such a big issue for these things?
I don't know if I can name, but I think Grin was one. There's Dash, but Dash is still big. Litecoin, Dogecoin flipped to POW and then got merged around with Litecoin, which has actually been pretty successful. Um, Namecoin, I forget the other merge mine side chains, the various forks of ETH Classic. Remember when the merge happened? Casp is a big one right now. Monero has another challenge where I know I'm just going to get absolutely dumpstered by these Monero people if they listen to this. But like Monero keeps trying to be ASIC resistant and CPU mineable, which is a noble task. It's just that it tends to bend towards ASIC. Eventually, once it becomes profitable and scaled enough, you have ASIC specialized machines come in. So they have to keep forking to maintain that. There's really only one chain that has maintained proof of work at scale and continues to be proliferated and adopted, and that's Bitcoin. The others are kind of tacked on and really struggle for identity. Even Litecoin, which I think Litecoin just has network effect, but I mean, okay, well, so does Bitcoin. But Litecoin has this emeritus status in proof of work blockchains, and I think really kind of functions more as a testnet. What do I think the future merge mining is? I have no idea. I look at Marathon, who says we're just gonna get right to the punch, and we're just gonna be the people who merge mine these, and it's us. Other people can participate. I think that's a smart idea. It's one of the more pragmatic, realistic, I would say like realpolitik approaches to launching a side chain. In which case, here I am now. This line of logic implicitly endorses Fractal. So.
Mhm. Okay, well, let's before we jump to Fractal, let's briefly touch on this Bitaxe kind of pleb mining, decentralized mining initiative, because ZK Shark posted something of OMB fame about we're going to try and decentralize through this like grassroots effort. And Bitaxe, if people don't know, like these like self-contained mini devices, they're kind of like lottery machines. They have very little hashes, so they're more of a toy than anything. But the idea is like if you get 10 trillion of these out there in the wild, then it equals some part of the network. Um, it sounds good on paper, but some people are very critical. This isn't going to go anywhere. So I don't know what you
I
guys'
love
thoughts
it.
on this.
I think
Yeah,
it's
I
awesome.
have
Go for
thoughts
it, Donny.
too. But yeah, okay, cool. I was walking around at Mining Disrupt, and I was with ZK, and we were asking the tables just as like sort of like I don't know, it seemed like a joke at the time to me, but they had all these like home mining devices that I didn't really take much stock of in my head, and we were like, hey, can we order like 200 of these? And they were like, actually, no, like we only have like 80 of them globally, I think. And he was like, okay, what about 1,000? Like, put in an order for 1,000. Is it possible to get 1,000 of these? And I think his point in asking all of this was not because he wanted to do one run of these and like distribute them to 1,000 people and be like, look at us go. We decentralize mining. He's like, there's no production for this. If it is a reality where somewhere in the future the hash power can be this much higher, that a collective of like 8 billion people, when the planet's population is 16 billion, if they all have these instead of scratch off lottery tickets, because people actually do stolen mine block, it does happen. People hit with lottery miners. It's if the odds are like equally as good as winning the lottery, and it has the benefit of doing this thing that helps the network not be controlled by like one entity, even if it's like in a small way, over the course of time, like if next year it doesn't outweigh Ant Pool, of course it won't. That's silly to even think that we could do that. But over the course of like decades, like if we really give a shit about Bitcoin on a long-term scale, why wouldn't we start initiatives like this that like can't hurt? That's my take on it.
I agree. I agree with that. Part of Bitcoin's part of its success is that there has been this ideological adherent component to it, and ZK he doesn't coin the term, but he really like beats it in, that of the economically irrational participant. I think this is important to zone in on because it's largely going to be economically irrational to try to like run these types of independent initiatives. But that's also not the point. If you can reliably have 1% or 0.5% of the network be this kind of like uncompromising like group of folks, whether it's a small group of people or a bunch of individuals, like I think that's pretty significant because that's a block a day. That's a block a day, and if you can get whatever transactions in that block per day, that's 2,000 to 4,000 transactions of freedom transactions. I think that's very important for that heartbeat to stay alive. But and ZK talks about the Bitaxe, which I think is there's also a graveyard of home miners that lead up to this point. But I think the Bitaxe is different, and that is it's actually zeroing in on the right model and design for this particular stage in proof of work. I was talking to Luke Dash Jr. about this half a year ago, and I asked Luke what his favorite ASIC was. This is at a private mining conference in person. We didn't talk about ordinals. I talked to him about mining. I asked him what his favorite miner was, and he said the Bitaxe. So this is one of the things where, like, I think like real OG people who are not economically rational, Luke in particular, they get the Bitaxe. It is the rallying cry. It's like the flag that you carry for the independent, like, cypherpunk component of Bitcoin.
You were talking about financially irrational. Did you say financially irrational participants?
Economically
irrational.
It's not always economically irrational, but it's like generally going to be.
It is, because everyone that I've talked to so far who doesn't really understand like the long-term goal of something like this is going, well, why don't we just get something with higher hash power, plug it in at home, and then put it towards a miner or towards a pool? And the answer to that is you won't make any money that way. You'll probably lose money that way.
But like now you have to unplug your dryer and run that shit into like a 240
even
volt
if you
outlet.
could find a 120 to do that in, it's still going to soak up power. You still have to, it's like a microwave or something. It's like, I don't know, $100 a month or whatever. You're not going to make $100 a month doing that.
These are going to be hobby projects, and you can do those. It's just like, it's not plug and play to do that. We're talking for like most people, they need something which is plug and play, which fits into their existing, like.
Otherwise, it will not happen.
Yeah.
And in the case of like, I think I know one family who has bought a lottery ticket and won a substantial amount of money, over $1 million. And this is 40 years into my life. I know one family personally that I've like used to visit their home who that's ever happened to, yet people still buy lottery tickets every day. They don't even know someone who's ever won. It's that irrationally improbable.
And you also don't have to, if you have a smaller rig and you're not consuming as much power, it's like a marginal minimal cost. Also, you don't have to lottery mine. It just happens that most Bitaxes are lottery mining. You can contribute this hash power to a pool which has itself economically irrational goals, such as processing OFAC sanctioned transactions. But that's a very important dynamic and component of people to be participating in the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, I think the economically irrational is understated. The lottery is a good example where it's like when you buy a lottery ticket, it's kind of like it's a little sliver of hope. Is it crazy? For sure, 100,000%. But you're trading $5 for a little bit of hope. Anything could happen, and like I could totally see like having a Bitaxe on this shelf over here. Whenever I look at it, I'm like, hey man, you never know. It could be.
If you put that at Target, just put 3,000 of those in every Target across America and say you have X odds of winning $300,000 every single day that you have this plugged in at home, and it's going to cost you $5 to $10 a month to run, and it's $200 to buy off the shelf. Like now, people would be like, Bitcoin's a scam. But give it a few years, and it seems like, why wouldn't that work? Like it seems stupid now, but I don't understand why it would work.
And there's another component here, which is the overall messaging, particularly that ZK communicates in his thought piece. One of my main themes this past couple of years has been that I think we've pretty much reached total addressable market capitalization of people who are going to be swayed into Bitcoin because of like last cycle's maxi narratives. How do you reinvigorate or invigorate people to do similar things, such as pleb mining, under which narratives? And ZK is very good at this, very good at creating a narrative and communicating this. I also have not really heard the pleb mining narrative from the angle of it fights against perceived or objectively real centralization across the mining vertical. And that I think is incredibly important because that adds an extra dimension to economic irrationality, which justifies it. So I think ZK has there's a couple paragraphs of ZK has which I don't really agree with. Like I don't as much as I love his energy arbitrage angle, like I think that's kind of more of a big boy institutional infrastructure play. But like that's a sidebar. Like that's not part of the core argument. I don't really think that works for like the home miner for the time being.
Yeah, I mean he's just trying to point out that you could like sneak one of these in and not even notice the difference. Like if you If you live in an apartment building that has included electricity, you're not going to plug in a 240 because they're going to kick you out. Like you can't plug in a real miner because they'll kick you out. But if you plug in this stupid thing that was going to cost you $5 a month and now costs you nothing, you can sneak it in under. Like that's where the arbitrage comes in. It's like at a mental level, not an actual pocketbook level. I think it's
We're gonna see
People
like
like to appreciate
what is it, The Godfather, where he like puts the gun behind the toilet in the restaurant, and then you have to go find it. There's gonna be like a million Bitaxes hiding all over the globe,
Did
in
you say?
all kinds of workplaces.
10
And
under your desk.
I can see
I can
that.
see it.
I don't think that's crazy.
No.
Yeah, and the one thing I like too is ordinals was it's this new way to use Bitcoin, and like Casey had an intention, but it caused so many other things like second, third order that you would never see coming. One of them being maybe this is a new floor for like fee price, for example, where it's like, did he solve a security problem? Not fully, but we have glimpses of what it's going to look like, and you would have never guessed that per se. And so, getting a bunch more people to pleb mine, I mean, I'm already feeling it. Where like I read a book on mining, and I'm like, I have this heater over on the wall. Can I replace that with like an S9 and like heat this room enough that it makes sense? I would never have thought of that if I hadn't put that in my head. And if you get a bunch of people to do that, they're gonna just be sitting there watching, Dexter season 3, and they'll be like, I could probably put a Bitcoin miner right there. That might work. And like that wouldn't happen otherwise.
I
Yeah.
also think that okay, even all the said, let's say this does become a huge movement, and it still doesn't even barely register on the decentralization meter. What we see is a lot of the pleb movements result in the net increase in hands-on and high concept understanding of how Bitcoin works. And one of Bitcoin's strengths has been that its participants understand it really well. I actually think that one of the reasons that mining has become like it is and centralized at certain points is because a lot of people didn't really understand what's happening. And the more participants you have who understand how it works and why certain components are important is one of the prerequisites for a healthy and decentralized network. So a lot of Bitcoin's game theory relies upon transparent communication of information. A lot of Bitcoin's game theory assumes that Bitcoin's fee market is representative of what it takes to have block inclusion. If you do away with that, if you don't have a fee market representative of like how you can get a transaction to a block, then Bitcoin is now this shadowy network, and that's not a fair network. So we need to, like, the more people who understand the attack vectors, the better. I think one of the big issues with maximalism is that it made a lot of the narrative myopic and said we're only going to talk about Bitcoin's attack surface in these dimensions and not these, because these are socially acceptable and these are we just haven't been watching other blockchains, so we're unfamiliar with like how the struggles they've had. So if running a Bitaxe makes people understand mining very much, like way more hands-on, then that is worth it. Even if you lose everything, like now you understand Bitcoin way better. I think that's a net win.
You lose the $200.
Well,
that
the
you put in.
$200, not like your house.
But, yeah, you can't
Yeah.
lose more than you put in, and the input
Yeah.
is so low at this point that it just feels like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like something not worth fudding in so far as it's just not like a destructive thing in any way. I don't think anyway.
Yeah,
Doesn't seem like it.
I'll even just shout out my other guy at Blockspace, Colin, who I have a bit of a tete-a-tete with. We kind of intentionally take opposite sides on this topic. He has just seen so many things like this that it's like this just kind of falls in a similar bucket for good reason. But the but and he might be right. Like this is the game for who is a competitive Bitcoin miner just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's always going to be an uphill battle. It may not be winnable. I just think if you don't throw in the towel now, throw in the towel into 50 years. Like we're only on
Does
year 50.
normalizing this one thing open the door for many other things that could be home home-centric Bitcoin mining tools like, I don't know, heating devices or dryer, like actual physical dryers that are in your basement that have to produce a ton of heat
Yeah,
that they could
there's
just
an I won't
sporadically
even
do
go
that?
through. I
Yeah.
have 2 or 3 different versions of like retail marketed mining solutions here
Right.
in my room right now,
But
actually.
like if
So
this is just one
yeah.
more step towards something that actually does that, and everybody's because we have so many things in our homes. I've thought about this a lot, and I don't really know if it has any value. It sounds like you've thought about this much. There are a ton of things that we have simply to create heat, and there's nothing doing work to produce that heat other than heating a coil. There's wasted energy there or wasted opportunity for recouping the energy lost. So if this is something that normalizes that, then I'm all for it. Why not?
Yeah.
Does the I mean, I've been thinking about this. Does the physics work out? Like when it comes to just like on pure efficiency, does the freaking coil I have in my little wall heater at 1500 watts versus a home miner make sense, or is it still just it doesn't net out?
It's 1
It
watt to
makes it
1 watt in my knowledge of it. It depends on the
the current
thing.
design of ASICs don't lend themselves to like heat dispersion as you would make a heater, because the coil is designed a coil in a heater is designed so that you can pass air through it and heat something. Whereas you would have to probably refactor the entire ASIC design for it to actually be a good heater. And you see this, like people who use the S9s to heat their like house or apartment, they kind of come up with these like contraptions to do that. Um, Also they can be very loud. It, like they're they're des-
That's what I
the
was going to say.
fans are
Yeah.
designed to be, produce air, not be quiet.
You have to wear
So like
like
you gotta,
earplugs at home.
yeah, but like I think it's very obvious. Like there's the largest output from Bitcoin mining besides Bitcoin is heat, and this is one of the most underutilized resources. What is it like? 30 to 40% of all energy in the world goes towards heating and cooling. Um, so that Bitcoin mining fits very well into that on a long enough timeline where
Mm,
we got all the efficiencies.
got it. Okay, we got 10 minutes left on our allotted time. Do we want to discuss Fractal, Magic Eden token launch, or wallets? Something you touched on, Donnie. I'm open to any of the or Nostr. Nostr's going to save social media for the fifth time. We could touch on Nostr if you want to.
I like
Doesn't
Any
matter
of
to
the,
me. Yeah.
Nostr's fun though.
are you guys on Nostr currently? Like using it daily?
No. Yes to the first, no to the second.
Like having an account and using Nostr are separate in my mind because everyone has a Nostr account. They've gave it a shot over the past year. Uh, but then, yeah, something happens like Telegram or X getting banned on Brazil, and everyone's like, "This is better.
Get a
Come
Nostr
use it."
account.
And then I go
I
check it,
use
and
it
I'm
like I
like,
use
"It's."
a ham radio or like a
I'm just.
CB radio. Like if everything stops, I'll go there. It's a parachute.
Exactly.
You turn it on every
Exactly.
now and then to make sure it works, but you never, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm the same way. Like I have an account. I sometimes remember to go check it, and then I'm like, there's nothing here really. It's just a weird echo chamber, and I don't want to deal with the friction of trying to like add people's npubs and get my friends list back. Like it hasn't crossed that chasm yet. So
Not easy enough. And I hate to
The
be that guy, but it's difficult to understand how it works because it's not fed to you in the same way that other social media platforms.
I was listening to uh I was listening to a really interesting podcast with Jameson Lopp and Zach of Casa. I was listening to an interesting podcast with Jameson Lopp on the history of email and how email kind of got, I wouldn't say captured, but it just bent towards this basically permission system where it's almost impossible to run your own email server now. This to me, and they didn't talk about Nostr, but I've heard comparisons made here. This to me seems a lot like we have a similar setting with email and Nostr in their genesis, and similar incentives and similar challenges. Um, it seems to me that Nostr hasn't structurally solved any of the problems that led email to be a pretty centralized uh, service provider system, unless I'm missing something. So I look at this and say, I don't know if this is actually a long-term solution. In the short term, like, yeah, maybe for the next decade, Nostr is a great great freedom tool. I don't know if I think it's a revolutionary product. I'm fine changing my opinion on this as I learn more information about it though.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
saw.
sure that.
I forgot who posted the graphic. I feel like it might have been Jameson of like a Nostr relay looks like this. It's like me sending data to just like 10 siloed computers, but they don't talk to each other. So it's just like I have 10 carbon copies, and then the end user connects to one of those relays, or maybe all 10, but there's no consensus amongst data replication on that side. So, um, yeah, he's making a pretty strong case that like you could see it going long-term centralized again, where it's like the largest relays just become the truth again, and it's no different than having Google run a Nostr relay, but you just trust the Google one because it's always online and super fast
Because
and
it's easy.
reliable. It has all your friends on it. Exactly. So like I could see that being the end game. So it doesn't feel like the
Entropy.
solution.
Yeah, the
Everything
bigger
ends up there.
the bigger problem seems to me is the existing structure of ISPs. To me, the thing that Nostr is trying to solve is something that is actually a problem with the existing internet service provider landscape, and I don't know how you solve this. I mean, I kind of understand Urbit, but I don't like fully
What do you mean by
understand.
ISP? Like at the level of like packet watching and like centralization or
Yeah, just the
censorship
ability to
versus just
freely
be
communicate. Yeah.
yeah. I could see that.
So I don't know. To me, that's maybe Noster's a step towards the path of figuring out how to improve the landscape of ISPs being your window to the world. But I don't know. We'll see.
Hmm. Interesting. I think one that's open to me is like um zapping is pretty cool. Like lightning and zaps is actually pretty interesting. Being able to like frictionlessly the way I think about zaps is like it's a it's a much higher signal of intent than a like. So you have like a share, a comment, a retweet, a like, in like a hierarchy. And sending money is the highest signal possible that you liked that. And so I could definitely see algorithms of like this got the most likes, sort by money. Um, and I think that's a paradigm that hasn't got traction on the internet to date, largely because I don't want to put my credit card in and have it charged for 7 cents 1,000 times. But Lightning works good for that. So I think that paradigm on a better social media platform is going to be big, but Nostr's the one right now, so it's going to get traction because of that.
Yeah. Dude, the if we're able to figure out the micro payments, the lightning style micro payments, like oh man, that's so cool. I love doing that. It's actually I love zapping on Nostr. It's addicting.
Mm-hmm.
You throw 100,000 sats in a wallet and you just kind of zap indiscriminately, 50 at a time. It's so cool.
Yep, yep. I've been over the weekend. I reread Szabo's mental transaction costs and micropayments paper from 1999, and holy shit, I've glanced at it before, but I haven't deep dived. Szabo, like, he gets a lot of love because he's an OG. Like, I think he did Bitgold, and he wrote some very seminal papers. But that dude is a fucking genius. Like the way he wrote that paper, it's hard to refute any of it. It's so well articulated. Because I'm trying to figure out how to make micropayments work for kind of our companies and like try to bring this to life through my own kind of like will by being some help to some people. Um, but his argument is that like whenever you do a transaction, you have like the fees associated, which is like the technological costs, Visa fees, etc. Those are the smaller fees of any transaction that you end up doing. It's the mental things of like, do I trust this person? Can I get a refund? Is this worth it? And micropayments make that way harder because you do it way more often. But there's something about Zaps, which is like the trade is very clear. I'm just giving you money because I liked that post. So that one's easy. And the other one I was thinking about is like, if you go to an arcade like Chuck E. Cheese or something, you get this gift card, this game card, you put $20 on it, and you're gonna spend that over the next hour, and that's a micropayment for 40 times over that hour. So there's something about time boxing micropayments is super interesting. Like here, you have an hour to go play in the playground, go do a bunch of random shit, and then it closes down, and you can do whatever. But yeah, I'm super bullish on this space.
One of the features that Strike, the app from Jack Mallers, had teased but never released was this idea of streaming Satoshis, where you could stream a sat every second or something like that. To me, this is one of the huge unlocks, and it blows my mind that we don't have easy ways to do this that I'm aware of. And this is where networks like Bitcoin or Lightning or other similar networks, which we haven't concepted yet, can like be amazing. It is crazy that we have a bi-weekly payment schedule as common in the West. It makes so much sense to be like streaming in real time for work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's been companies trying it. There's the current one that's on the docket that's kind of like raised some money is called FewSats, and we'll see if they achieve it. But they're doing like data storage as a service. You can stream for content. Fountain, which is like a podcast player,
Love
they're
Fountain.
part of it. They allow you to do this, where it's like every minute you listen, you stream. Yeah, I like the idea. This goes back to mental cost, though. Is like it actually changes the way you view content so drastically that it needs like a behavior change first. Because like the way Netflix works is it's just like pay $15, get access to a million movies. You're only going to watch 0.01%, so that's your main calculus. But if I could pay, 2 cents a minute and be like, okay, this movie is shit. Let me click off and go watch the next thing. I'm only out like a quarter, and then I can go to the next one, and you can like actually get bought in really quickly. But that actually makes me think like it kind of. I guess the hard part about streaming sats in that way is that you optimize for like, is this good right now? And you might not get to the juicy part. Like maybe a movie starts slow and it has like a really good ending, like The Sixth Sense. But it's like, no, this is boring. I don't like this.
Or the owner
I'm
of the
out.
account, for the sake of Netflix anyway, the owner of the account is the person paying for it, but there's 6 other people watching. And I think that model would fail really quickly because people will just turn it on and walk away because the person who's actually paying for the thing is not the one using it for the most part. So I mean, I'm sure that comes into play
We're getting
somewhere
too granular,
on that
guys.
side too.
Getting too
All right.
detailed.
I do want to
Trying
say
design
something
a
about
whole
Magic
product
Eden.
out. But I want to
Before
go back
we-
and read that, Jacob. I think I actually have not even read that paper. I just looked at the headline and filed it away and never got around to it. Shout out to the Zabos of the world who wrote cool shit back in the day, which we just have kind of glossed over or forgotten.
What's it
I think
called?
It's called Micropayments and Mental Transaction Costs. It came out in May 1999, so 25 years ago, and
Wow.
it still holds up.
Wow. Yeah. And he wrote some other good stuff, even up through the late 2010s, that I would highly recommend as well. Nick Szabo is credited for concepting smart contracts as well. I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
Yep,
Yeah.
he did.
Cool.
He was the one that said that a basic point of sale system is doing a very basic smart contract when you run your credit card, and then it does some things in the background.
Wow.
Yep. So
Dawkins
That-
level
that-
stuff.
that would be
Yep.
my GOAT podcast guest for sure. Is if he ever came back to get Szabo, would
Dude,
be
I don't think he's been seen for a long time. He's kind of dropped off the radar. I think he gave like a
his
talk
last
2
his
years
last
ago.
post on Twitter was like 2021, and he gave a talk at the 2022 Bitcoin conference, and that's the last I think he's been seen.
Ooh, his last actual post is a repost of BTC Kaz, who is the vice president of the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association.
Ooh,
Mic drop.
flex.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's the podcast, y'all. We should probably drop it right there.
Shout
Can
out
I throw
Kaz.
30 seconds on Magic Eden token just for food for
Yeah.
thought for next time? Real quick
Yep.
one. Because it's something I think I've finally digested what they're doing. It sounded just like a token drop, but no token drop is just a token drop. It sounds a lot to me like Optimism's retroactive public goods funding idea, where they motivate people rather to build dApps in an ecosystem and reward them once it has already provided some sort of value to the network that they have laid out in front of to build the dApps on. So I think that what Magic Eden is doing is trying to get people to build on an open source platform dApps for encouraging runes, ordinals, NFT trading, blah, 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 whatever, and making this ME Foundation to pay those things, to pay the creators of the dApps once they have already created traffic. I don't know where it's going to live. I don't know what the supply is going to be. I don't know any of the price speculation stuff, but I think that's the concept. And it works for optimism. So I don't know why it wouldn't work there too.
Does it? Well, did they recently announced the optimism one though, right? They haven't been doing it. This is something they've announced recently that they're like
The optimism one?
I thought so.
Over a year, I think.
Oh, interesting.
I've been watching because I had to write some. I used to work for a media company that did interviews with like layer twos and ETH projects, and I had to interview a bunch of optimistic roll-ups and do a bunch of research on them. And I was on the Optimism website reading about this. Maybe they just launched it in reality recently, but I thought it was up and running about a year ago. If I'm not mistaken.
Got it.
I don't know. I don't know what they were relaunching.
Cool
I'm
idea.
excited for the token drop. I hope it resurrects the token frenzy again, but yeah, it's going to cause a lot of people to download the Magic Eden wallet. I'm interested to see how this shakes up the wallet landscape. So I use everything. I use everything, and I store all of my important stuff in Sparrow wallet type things. So
I have everything loaded across every wallet. It's buckshot everywhere. No one can find it but me, and I can't lose anything because of that. It's just it's everywhere. It's all over the place. It's every platform.
If you don't know where it is, the wrench attack surely can't be to find it either.
If you ask me, I couldn't tell you, but I can find it. Like you say, Donny, where's the silverware drawer? I don't know, but put me near it, and I'll tell you exactly where it is.
You can't wrench attack somebody if they don't know either, so it's perfect.
Yeah, right.
That's a Sun Tzu quote, not Sun Tzu quote.
Sun Tzu?
If the best smoke screen against your enemy is if you yourself don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
Put all your stuff in the blender and dump it out.
It also goes biblical, like don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. It's like I don't know what that shit is. Do I even know that? I don't think it's
God's way of explaining two of two multi-sig.
Yeah, 100%.
Way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Legend, absolute legend. All right, I think that's the pod. Thanks, guys.